peace and unity, then boom from up above. A massacre at a festival, rockets drop like hail from the sky, running in desperation, hysterically trying to hide. Laying on the ground, acting as if dead, beside bodies of loved ones shot blank in the head. Some run into bullets, desperate to escape. The desert is vast and open, they endure more brutal rape. Roads are blocked, there's no way out, every direction is a void. Masked armed terrorists, raging at large, drug-fueled, overjoyed. Cars burnt out, pure souls inside, metal carcasses litter the roads. Blooded bodies, limbs blown off, taken in their load. Dragged by their hair, hours time back, a gunshot away from death. Chaos, bedlam, anarchy, any moment their last breath. Forced into Gaza, kidnapped and paraded, spat on, stamped on, lured at, barricaded and aided, degraded. Injured beyond imagination, the street they now ignite. Sweet throwing celebrations, a perverse, unfathomable delight. World, I ask your verdict, how do you reply? They say, we don't believe your evidence, we think it's all a lie. We believe you're all complicit, we now wage our war on you. We'll target and destroy you, we'll turn on every single Jew. We'll march the streets, we'll spread the hate, we'll tear down hostage posters. We'll turn your world upside down, you'd wish you'd never host us. We'll deny your pain, we'll damage your goods, we'll graffiti on your doors. We'll turn you into the wicked ones, we'll be out in scores and scores. We'll rename it the resistance, we'll call it freedom fighting. We'll make you think you're going mad with off-the-scale gaslighting. We'll camp at universities, we'll call it the occupation. We'll damage the meaning of Zionist on every demonstration. We'll bombard social media, we'll infiltrate your lives, we'll threaten your very existence, we'll hope you don't survive. We'll turn the world against you, we'll make you the terrorist state. We'll turn your truth into lies, we'll make it legitimate. We'll shout you out of theatres, we'll damage synagogues, we'll intimidate you on the street, we'll change the dialogue. We'll fly the Palestinian flag, we'll engage in no discussion. We'll deface Jewish monuments, there'll be no repercussion. We'll circulate propaganda, we'll cover up our face. We'll wear terror-inspired headbands, we'll annihilate your race. We'll make up genocidal slogans, we'll chant them on the streets. We'll make your city unbearable, week after week after week. And as we stand there, shocked and astounded, completely floored and entirely dumbfounded, they've ignited our hearts. We will fight back with honesty, accuracy, truth, and fact. From the depths of our soul, we will tell you this: we will never, ever cease to exist. Ladies and gentlemen, 1 minute silence.
Shut up. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Leeds Against Anti-Semitism warmly welcomes you to this special and historic event. As you can see, we have created 3 installations that we would love you to walk around after all the speeches. We're also selling jewellery and hoodies and have our usual leaflet table for those who are interested in the information that we hand out on the streets. On the large screen, we have a rolling film, so please have a watch. Who remembers where they were when JFK died? Obviously not me, because I'm too young. Or what about Elvis? I pretend that I'm too young. Or when we heard the tragic news of Princess Diana. Sadly, October the 7th is now another day that is seared into our memories. I remember where I was. We were with our son's family celebrating Simchat Torah in London. People were crying, sharing what I thought at the time were wild stories beyond comprehension that just couldn't be true. The news became more disturbing as the day wore on. It is utterly tragic that a year later we are still in this nightmare. It has been a wake-up call for each and every one of us, Jew, Muslim, Christian, and those of non-religion. None of us will ever be the same again. Who hasn't been impacted by the cruelty that was inflicted on that terrible day and continues to be inflicted on the hostages? A tsunami of hate has been unleashed upon us that has escalated through the complicity of our national media outlets. Who can we trust? We have lost trust in our media and we look around us and search for like-minded people to find solace and shared comfort. We are so grateful for any glimmer of support. I would like to share some positives, however. I've made so many new friends, both in person and virtually. To really cheer you up, please follow on X, Cheryl I Wrote It, Lee Kern, Nasha Jew, to name just a few. There are so many brilliant, articulate supporters on social media. There is also an undeniable feeling of pride in the ingenuity, resilience and bravery of Israel, giving hope to millions of Lebanese and Iranians and to all of us with a new reshaped Middle East. Brian and I have just come back from Israel and I would like to share with you that the Israelis I met said thank you. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for your support. Thank you for caring. We at Leeds Against Anti-Semitism say to you all, thank you for coming today. Thank you for helping us counter the rise in anti-Semitism. We have truly some remarkable speakers today, and I love to introduce you now to Emma Levy. Adam is on his way, so he will be here, but we'll start with Emma. Thank you, Emma. Emma is the president of Leeds JSOC and has just started second year studying international relations and Spanish. Emma has spoken at several panels, including Holocaust Education Trust, in the House of Lords and for Prince William, advocating for Jewish students. Since October the 7th, Emma has been to Israel to hear from survivors and hostage family members, including with UJS and the World Union of Jewish Students, on political leadership trips. Her trip in December inspired her to start the Hostages Awareness Campaign, joint with UJS, for which she won Campaigner of the Year. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to Emma Levy, please.
October the 7th was during my first week of university, a time that should have been filled with new friendships, parties, and uninhibited fun, was instead shattered by a nightmare that continues to this day, 1 year later. I heard the devastating news when I was on the way to lunch on Simchat Torah. My heart dropped in fear. Like many of you, I have a lot of family in Israel. My sister serves in the IDF and at the time was stationed on a base in the south, very near to Gaza and the kibbutzim attacked. A few days later, when terrorists were still embedded in Israel, I received a message from her on our family group chat saying, "There's terrorists on my base, I love you, bye." Thank God it was a miscommunication and it was simply reserve soldiers who weren't recognized. It's difficult to describe the feelings I experienced then. I'd seen pictures of what Hamas had done to soldiers, particularly young women. It was anguish like I'd never felt before, and I'm unlikely to feel ever again. I'm so lucky that this was a 10-minute long false alarm, but for the families and friends of thousands of Israelis, this is their reality. As concerns for my sister persisted, a new challenge unfolded on campus. In just a few days, hostility and fear became the new normal. As a politics student, I got into a disagreement with a classmate about the conflict. He later saw me across campus and beckoned me over, calling me a settler and a colonizer. Another student who I didn't know joined in the shouting, and when I walked away towards my friend, they screamed at me, "Go cry to your Jewish friends." Many lecturers, instead of spreading the truth, stoked the fire. One announced to a full lecture theatre that we need an intifada now, praising the so-called brave occupiers of the Parkinson building. An emeritus professor leaked the address of Hillel, encouraging protest outside, likely leading to its vandalism a few days later. 7 months on, I'm really proud to say that this professor is facing punitive action and can no longer access his department or students in the university. The combination of these experiences was a rude awakening to what it means to be a Jew on campus. I had two options: either hide, keep quiet in my lectures and with my new friends about my true opinions and identity, or I speak up, use this as an opportunity to educate and advocate for my people, but also for truth. Standing here today as JSOC president, I think it's obvious which route I chose. I was elected in December last year, just a few months into Leeds. 2 weeks into the job, crisis struck. A malicious and aggressive campaign was launched against our beloved chaplain Zachariah for the alleged crime of serving in Milawim. Soon after, the address of Hillel was leaked, and a few days later, it was vandalized with graffiti. This was the most blatant act of campus anti-Semitism in memory. Leeds Hillel has flourished as the hub for Jewish student life for over 70 years, untouched. The fact that our one safe space amidst all the madness was attacked sent shockwaves throughout not just the Leeds community, but worldwide, so much so that the President of Israel asked, "How's Leeds? I've heard it's awful there." But in the wake of this horror, what I will always choose to focus on is the incredible support we received. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, the North Leeds community. Thank you to everyone who offered Shabbat hospitality and donations to ensure that Jewish student life continues to thrive. Thank you for attending our Stand Against Anti-Semitism and demonstrating that we're not alone in this fight. It meant so much to me personally, as well as the wider student community. October the 7th brought on unimaginable trauma, loss, and horrors that we wish could be undone. However, it's undeniable that it's created a sense of solidarity that perhaps we didn't feel like we needed before. I see this so poignantly in the relationship between Leeds JSOC and the North Leeds community. It's something that in future years should be nurtured and treasured. We will forever be grateful for your love in our time of need. There have been several other examples of strength and solidarity that I would like to share. Hillel was vandalized on a Friday morning, and the next day at Shacharit on Shabbat morning, the shul was the most busy it has ever been in memory. We came together to celebrate my friend Oz's late bar mitzvah. The Monday after, we hosted a party with about 300 people crammed into Hillel, as planned, pre-vandalism, to prove to Jewish students that we will not let hate define us. We carry on. These examples are testament to the spirit of not only Jewish students in Leeds, but the Jewish people as a whole, unbreakable. We held a stand against anti-Semitism weeks after the vandalism that many of you attended. Around 300 people gathered in the center of campus, making a bold statement that we will not give in to intimidation. It was dignified, peaceful, and brave. But most importantly, it served as a reminder to both ourselves and the outside world that Jewish students are here. We matter, and we're not going anywhere. Gone are the days where Jews keep their head down, trying not to be noticed. Whilst this isn't the university experience I ever imagined for myself, I have found advocating for my people the most rewarding path I could ever have chosen. Whether that's sharing the experiences of Jewish students with politicians and the media, or campaigning for the hostages, I simply feel it's the right thing to do, and it's the only thing to do. Despite everything this year, we have the highest influx of freshers that anyone can remember. Leeds may have been one of the worst campuses affected by anti-Semitism, but JSOC are receiving a record number of students. The resilience that my peers have been nothing short of a miracle. Another aspect that has guided me throughout this time has been Israel. Since October the 7th, I've had the opportunity to go 3 times. In December, I went to visit my sister and friends, and I also went in April and in August on a UJS leadership and with the World Union of Jewish Students, respectively. On all of these times, I've spoken with relatives of hostages or those murdered by Hamas. What will always stay with me is their message. Keep fighting for the hostages, for Israel, for truth, and for justice. During my December visit, I went to Hostage Square. Wandering around, I stumbled across an American delegation who were hearing from Omer Shem Tov's parents. I remember his mother saying how he has asthma, and the pain in her eyes when she said how he didn't have his medication. How could he survive? Omer was kidnapped at Nova and is still in captivity 1 year later. Meirav, the Hostages and Missing Families coordinator, then spoke about all the incredible efforts the Forum have done. Within hours of October the 7th, Israelis from all over the country mobilized with a singular mission of getting the hostages home. Thus, the headquarters were born, working day and night to get the hostages home. Their work spans from raising awareness and campaigning to providing therapeutic support to families and returned hostages. They also have significant diplomatic weight and have played a huge role in the international arena. After hearing this, I was struck with a feeling of, I have to do something. It was one of those epiphany moments that's make or break. So I went up to Meirav and introduced myself as the very newly elected JSOC president in Leeds. I asked, what can students in the diaspora do? She then invited me back to the HQ and showed me the intricate workings of the Forum. The best of every sector in Israeli society, finance, advertising, law, diplomacy, etc., pause their day job to use their skills to bring them home now. This felt like the most Jewish thing ever. We were always taught from a young age that God gives us skills and opportunities, and it's our responsibility to harness them for the good. This is exactly what the Forum does, and it's what I realized students need to do. Our advocacy today can influence the future lawyers, politicians, and thinkers of tomorrow. A simple conversation could impact a non-Jewish student's perspective in ways that we can't imagine. From that trip, I collaborated with UJS to organise the UK Students Hostages campaign, nationwide. 6 months later, I went back to the Forum and actually bumped into Shelley there. When I shared what had been done on campus, such as the challah bake for the hostages across 20 different campuses, or the money we raised, it meant so much to them, more than we could ever imagine. They always ask that we share their stories, so I'm taking the opportunity to do so now. In April, I visited Kfar Aza and heard from Chen, who, thank God, was away on the 7th of October. We sat in her house and under the roof where terrorists shot from. Her best friend Shachar was killed, as well as her friend Avi, who saved her father's life on the 7th. She told us about her sister, who was with her children, trapped in her house for 12 hours, suffocating and terrified that at any minute, terrorists would come and kill her and her children. They were the lucky ones, they survived. On my most recent trip, I visited the Magen David Adom headquarters and heard from a first responder at the 7th of October. She played the recording of a 7-year-old boy from Kibbutz Be'eri, calling her, explaining, "My parents and younger sister have just been murdered in the kitchen. I'm now hiding in the wardrobe. What do I do?" It's our duty to share stories like these because they're not stories, they're a reality. As hard as this year has been in Leeds, we can't forget that it's simply a microcosm for what's happening there in Israel. My message to every one of you is that we need to be resilient and continue advocating because we're the lucky ones who can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. Okay, now I'd like to introduce you to Mark Burbeck. So Mark is described as a supermensch by those who know him. Mark Burbeck and a number of concerned individuals founded Our Fight in the shadow of 7/10 pogrom. They were shocked at the lack of empathy for Jews and Israelis in the days and weeks that followed 7/10 and realised a new organisation was needed. One aimed at convincing non-Jews that anti-Semitism is the most significant issue of our time. In the years since 7/10, the campaign has organised protests and counter-protests, challenging boycotts, arms embargoes, curbs on free speech, and amnesia around the role of Hamas. Mark has spoken about the work of the campaign on the Institute of Ideas podcast, Andrew Doyle's Free Speech Nation, Andrew Gold's Heretics podcast, Spike's Last Orders, Ben Kentish on LBC and NTD. He has also written on some of these issues for Spiked. So welcome, Mark.
So I'm not Jewish. I've never been to Israel. I'm not really sure what a mezuzah is for. I don't know the high holidays. But what I do know is what a pogrom looks like. And last year on the 7th of October, that's exactly what we saw, something we haven't seen for decades, for generations, since the Holocaust, the worst day for Jews since the Holocaust. 1,200 people slaughtered. But there's another day which should be etched in our memories just as clearly as 7/10, which is the 9th of October. On the 9th of October, I went to Downing Street. There was a vigil organised by the Jewish community, the Israeli community in London, opposite Downing Street. There were young people there with their Israeli flags draped around their shoulders, lighting candles, remembering, even as the news was still emerging, friends who'd been killed at the Nova Festival. They still at this time didn't even know where people were, whether they were hostages, whether they were dead, whether they were safe. Comforting each other, some songs. And I went along to this vigil naively expecting there to be a trade union banner here, maybe some friends and neighbours with inadequate words, but at least some words and maybe a hug for our fellow citizens who were caught up in this crisis. And they weren't there. There was nothing. The lack of people there was quite shocking. But that was not the whole story, because later that evening, when I got home and saw on the news that there'd been a party outside the Israeli embassy. People had been celebrating, setting off fireworks, singing, dancing in the street, imagining that this was some kind of struggle for freedom, this pogrom. So that was the 9th of October. And for non-Jews, this is probably the most significant of the 2 days, because this is the day when people didn't step up. There were people who weren't outside at Downing Street showing solidarity. And maybe, sure, people weren't outside the Israeli embassy either. But the thing is that If your voice isn't being heard, then the only voice that's being heard is the marches through London. The only voice being heard is the cheering and the singing outside the Israeli embassy. The only voices being heard are the trade unions who are calling for embargoes on Israel, or the students who are banning speakers from appearing, or even our ridiculous Prime Minister with his pathetic essay today showing completely inadequate solidarity. Or even David Lammy, who had the gall to speak at that first vigil on the 9th of October, and then now leads the charge in trying to isolate Israel and present it as a pariah. So I say to people who are not Jewish, if you don't speak up, then these are the people who are speaking for you. There's no point. There's a silent majority. There's no point in being in the silent majority, because it's the loud and the vocal who speak for you. And we hear a lot at the moment about this being a civilizational struggle, and it is. And people talk about civilization versus barbarism. And often what people are picturing is the barbarism of the grenade being thrown into the bomb shelter, into the shelter, or the rapes and the burnings at the Nova Festival. And it's true, that is barbarism. But the barbarism here that we see is the barbarism of posters, hostage posters being ripped down off walls, or a young woman shouting "Free Palestine" in the middle of a minute's silence for the dead of Nova. That's barbarism. That's a civilization. That's a civilization that's lost direction. And so, over the last year, I've been embarrassed. A number of people who've said to me, "Thank you for setting up our fight. Thank you to my friends and colleagues who joined and set the campaign up." And I've been embarrassed. I've been embarrassed because people feel they even need to thank us. I've been embarrassed that there are so few of us, and I apologize for that, and I'm doing what I can. And I feel embarrassed because we should be thanking you. Israel is leading the fight for civilization. Israel is leading the fight against Hamas. Israel leads the fight against Hezbollah, against the IRGC, and they're being presented as a pariah for doing so. And so I thank you. It's an honor to stand with you. It's an honor to be here today. And Israel, your fight is our fight.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was amazing. Can I call on Tammy Sobel, please? Tammy.
A song about how we all need each other in these times. Feel free to join in. you're not strong, I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long. We're gonna need somebody to lean on. Thank you. Let's all lean on each other. Jews, non-Jews, whoever you are, we need each other right now. Thank you.
I'm delighted that Adam's made it. Thank you, Tammy, first of all. Well done, Tammy. Adam Manit is a British Israeli living in Brighton. His cousin, Tashi Adan, 50, is one of the 101 hostages in Gaza. Tashi's eldest child, Mayan, 18, was murdered on October the 7th. Adam has spent every day since that terrible day advocating for his cousin Tashi and for all the hostages to be brought home. Bring them home now.
Shalom, Leeds! I just came from Manchester, but now I'm in Yorkshire, God's own country. I am British Israeli, I promise you, even though my accent doesn't quite convince. I really want to thank you, first of all, for having me here, but also thank you for coming out. I am a hostage family, one of 101 families, still doing everything we can to bring our loved ones home. And I gotta tell you, it's been a long year. I didn't think I'd be here a year later, still campaigning for my cousin, Tahi. I didn't think that it would take 365 days to bring him home. You might remember there was a deal in November. You might remember that some hostages were even released on humanitarian grounds. And early on, it was really kind of hopeful. We thought, of course, it won't take much longer and everyone will come home, and it was a horrible thing, but at least we can get Tahi home. And when I say horrible thing, a year ago tomorrow, 6:29 a.m., the rocket sirens blared in Nahal Oz, where my family live, near the Gaza border. Thousands of rockets flying, the children sleeping in the bomb shelter. As is common in the area, you don't have the Iron Dome to protect you because it's too close to Gaza. It's too difficult for the Iron Dome to lock on and take out rockets. The only safety you have is a bomb shelter. And so many families have their children sleep in the shelter as security. And so when they heard the rocket sirens, as is quite normal in those areas, they rushed into the bomb shelter with the children. My cousin Tahi, his wife Gali, and his 3 children, Mayan, Yael, and Shachar. They have 4 children. The 4th was in Tel Aviv, fortunately. They realized quite soon that it wasn't just rockets. First of all, they heard gunfire. Then they saw in the WhatsApp group for the community, a community of only 400, that there was an intrusion. Then they heard the voice of 17-year-old Tomer, one of the residents of Nahal Oz. Tomer was calling out to people in Hebrew that everything was okay and that everyone could come out. But they knew that was not Tomer speaking of his own volition. They knew that he was speaking under duress. What happened was Hamas had taken Tomer, shot his stepfather in the leg, and forced him at gunpoint to go house to house hunting for all the remaining hiding residents of Nahal Oz. Eventually, when they were done with Tomer, they would murder him, 17-year-old boy. My family heard Tomer's voice and they didn't come out. They stayed in the bomb shelter. But of course, these are bomb shelters. They're not designed for intrusion. So Tzachi, my cousin, barred the door to protect his family. Mayan, his eldest, had just turned 18 years old. The balloons from her party were still up in the house. Only a few days before, she had celebrated, as with her family, the first flushes of adulthood. Perhaps feeling a newfound sense of responsibility as a young woman, as a young adult, Mayan helped her father Tzachi bar the door. Eventually, the terrorists gave up the ruse of trying to get Tomer to lure them out and shouted in Arabic and English that they should come out. They didn't. They hid in the shelter, but the terrorists knew they were there. And they fired into the door and they shot Mayan in the head. At first, Tzachi didn't know what happened. It was dark, lights were off. The terrorists gained entry to the shelter. They opened the door and the light shone, and Tzachi saw his firstborn lying dead on the floor, her blood spilling out onto the tiles. Tzachi desperately tried to save her. He desperately tried to resuscitate her, but it was to no avail. It was a killing blow. Meanwhile, the terrorists had taken the rest of the family out, forced them to sit in the sitting room, grabbed Gali, Mayan's mother, Tzachi's wife's phone, forced her to unlock it, and then live streamed the family's horror as they just process what just happened. The clip from that live stream became one of the first clips that was circulated around on social media on that horrible day. You might recall the two children and Gali protecting them fiercely, like a lioness. Shachar crying, 9-year-old boy. Yael trying to soothe him, but crying. Terrorists concerned that they were still showing their position, tried to get the children to be quiet, tried to tell them to shut up. The children couldn't shut up, they've just lost their eldest sister. And Yael bravely spoke to them in English and explained that they had just killed their sister, and that's why Shachar was crying so much and couldn't stop. And then the terrorists responded to her in English, "Don't worry, she's with your God now." Rocket sirens, horror, all live streamed onto Gali's Facebook. Gali doesn't live stream. So when the family, the rest of us, saw a notification that she was live streaming on Facebook, that is how most of us found out what happened. Can you imagine? Eventually, the terrorists finished their round around the community, killed whoever they needed to kill, and they brought the Miran family, our neighbors, into our sitting room, into the family sitting room of my family's house, which they kind of used as their staging point. Miran family, a beautiful young couple with 2 young children, Alma and Roni, 1 and 3. Eventually, sensing that the IDF were on approach, the terrorists retreated back to Gaza. They took some insurance with them. They took Omri, and they took Tzachi. Barefoot, Tzachi still with the blood of his firstborn all over him, staining his clothes, his legs, his arms, complete shock. Frog marched him to Gaza. That was the last we saw him. The last time we ever saw any news of Tzachi was when Hamas sent us a video of him on their Telegram channel, where they said that he was dead, and they blamed it on Israel. They blamed it on Netanyahu. They did this with Omri too. And in the video you see both Tzachi, and then a few months later you see Omri, and they both look gaunt and skinny and pale and bleary-eyed and not well, but alive. And so when we saw the video, it was a very bittersweet moment, because we knew what was happening and how horrific it was to see him paraded triumphantly in this kind of psychological terrorism by Hamas. But at the same time, we saw Tzachi alive. And we knew he was alive, and it was a bittersweet moment. They did this with many of the hostages. They treated it like a game show. They would say, are they alive? Are they dead? And they wouldn't answer the question. They would leave us to wonder. And they would end their messages with the ubiquitous red inverted triangle that now see everywhere on our streets here in the UK and around the world, with people chanting, death to Israel, death to Jews, praising Hamas, praising Hezbollah. This is what they support. It's been 365 days. Every day I wake up with that horrendous feeling that I had waking up on October 7th, dreading to check the notifications on my phone in case some new horror has happened while I slept for the few hours I could manage. This is not an easy time. A few days ago, we marked what would have been Mayan's 19th birthday. Today, my family are spending it together before tomorrow, having to think about her death. Today we celebrate her life. A beautiful young woman, the whole world ahead of her, a talented volleyball player. Her first romance, she was in love. She just got her license. She was driving, she was feeling independent, all snuffed away by the evil Hamas. 101 hostages with similar stories, families wishing every day, thinking, driving themselves mad, thinking what they can do. Last week I was in New York, banging my head against the wall, talking to UN officials, dignitaries, heads of state. Last week I was in Downing Street, meeting the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister, begging them to do more. I know no one's doing enough. I'm not doing enough. You're not doing enough. Our Prime Minister's not doing enough. The Israeli government's not doing enough. Most certainly the United Nations is not doing enough. The US government, and so on. And the reason why I can tell you that confidently is because the hostages are not home. When they're home, we can rest. Until then, let me just end by thanking every one of you for being a voice for them. Some days, I gotta tell you, in all honesty, I'm tired. I don't sleep, I barely eat. I just do what I can for my family. But I have to, they're my family. But you don't. You do it selflessly. You do it because you are the embodiment. When we say Am Israel Chai, it's not just a slogan. You are the embodiment of Am Israel Chai. You are the reason why we will succeed as a people, while this day, this nightmare will end, and one day we can dream of the day when our hostages are returned, our loved ones are returned, our people are united, and we prosper as one. Am Israel Chai. Thank you so much for everything you do. Please continue to be a voice for the hostages. Speak out, stand up, unafraid. You are not Jews with trembling knees. Thank you so much. Shana Tova.
Thank you, Adam, from the heart. Our final speaker today is the very famous John Mann, who we are thrilled to welcome today. He's a very famous Leodensian? Is that Leodensian? Even? He's currently sitting in the House of Lords, a former Labour MP for Basildlaw. Is that right? Basildlaw. In 2019, Lord Mann famously refused to stand as a candidate for the Labour Party in protest at Jeremy Corbyn's failure to tackle rampant anti-Semitism within the party, to take up the full-time post as the government's anti-Semitism czar. So a big round, please, for Lord Mann.
Okay, I'm no different to any of you. Just a grain of sand. A tough grain of sand. I've lasted 5 prime ministers now. But a single grain of sand. And you're all single grains of sand. But when you put the sand together, then you can create a beach. And if we want to stop a flood, we're always going to need to have a beach. And so what you've done by turning out today is as important as anything anyone has done anywhere today. Remembering, honouring, in anger, in frustration, in defiance. Thinking of the absurdity that anyone could want anything other than the immediate return of every single hostage now. So I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank the organisers. These things don't just happen. I want to thank the police. I want to thank the council leader, the MPs who are here. And I want to thank the Community Security Trust. That's who I spoke to a year ago. At 8:32 in the morning, the Chief Executive, Mark Gardner, of the Community Security Trust. Because it was clear how immense and seismic the events that were only just unfolding were going to be. And sadly, we were right. But what we need to do, not you, what we need to do is to hold firm, is to stay strong, is to be clear on what we're saying on our messaging. That's defiance. and not to be distracted by anybody else. And I can assure you, spend an awful lot of my time dealing with extremists and how to counter extremists. A lot more than I could tell you in terms of what is happening and what will be happening and how, of what succeeded and what has failed and why. Time will come to go through that. Not now. But in dealing with that, in dealing with Iran ringing me up on, perhaps it's the press, on my personal mobile phone. In dealing with the kinds of things that CST have been so magnificent at stopping that you don't know about. At dealing with what government needs to do and kicking them hard, bloodily, whatever they fail to move, whoever's in government, whoever's the minister. And I've told them just in the last few days again, current government, they'll hear what they have to hear, and if they don't act and don't do what's correct, I'll have to make it a bit wider, because there is no other alternative. You see, if we as a society, as a country, allow our Jewish community to continue having a year like you've experienced this year, then we're not really a country. We're not really a civilization. We're getting rid of everything that we have. But I can tell you that's not going to happen. The main reason it's not going to happen is because of you. Because you're not going to allow it to happen. And I have a message of, I don't know if you call it hope, but let me tell you, the vast, overwhelming majority of people in this city, in this county, in this country are overwhelmingly behind you in this, for decency, for democracy, against extremism, for having every single hostage returned. And yet, we can bemoan that silent majority. But it's a silent majority on our side, not against us. And that, I think, is a vital message that everyone needs to understand, not least those in power. Because that is the vast consensus in this country. And let me tell you as well, you're not going to be deserted by those who've been standing with you. Whether they've been vocal enough, whether they've been effective enough. My father walked out of that hospital, it's a long time ago, over 40 years. And he walked to that building there, and he wasn't meant to walk, because he'd been given, he refused to pay for it, a private room in order to die of cancer in there. And he walked out to that meeting, to that building, 2 days before he died, to attend a meeting of the Leeds Council for Racial Equality. Well, let me tell you, I know many of the people who've done a lot of work in standing alongside the Jewish community. Don't ever think that we will leave you on your own, because we will not. We will stand with the Jewish community. We will fight with the Jewish community. And where we can, we will help organise for more effective campaigning, for a more effective voice, because we are going to win. We're going to win the battle, we're going to win the war. You as a community, as the Jewish community here and across the world has always done, will continue, if you like, to rebuild the beach. Will continue to rise again. Will continue to be Jewish as you choose to be, on your terms, not on anyone else's terms. Free to do so. Free to be yourselves, free to be your community. And today, in this horrendously sad, appalling anniversary, let's just give that message out and keep it simple. And I end with 4 words, because it's all any of us need to say. Free the hostages now. Free the hostages now. Free the hostages now. Let everyone across this city, this county, this country, this world know. Free the hostages now. Free the hostages now. Free the hostages now. Free the hostages now. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I'd now like to introduce Hannah Winnick.
Six months ago, an anxious group of Jews from North Leeds took to the streets for the very first time as Leeds leads against anti-Semitism. Our aim was to counter-protest the Women in Black, a pro-Palestinian group of women who hold a silent vigil each week in Dortmund Square. We didn't really know each other. We weren't sure what the women across the road would think of us, and we definitely did not know how we would be received by the general public. But after that initial 90 minutes together, we knew that we had started something very special. Now, every Tuesday, Leeds leads against anti-Semitism has a presence in town. People know we're going to be there. They wait to talk to us, and some have even started joining us in our weekly actions. The aim of us being there is to talk to the public about the hostages still held in Gaza, about the ongoing situation in Israel, and to explain to them how the rising anti-Semitism in the UK and across the world is affecting our community. We hand out leaflets, as you've seen at the back, on all sorts of topics, from Israel and Gaza and the LGBTQ+ rights across the Middle East to anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. We talk about the current situation as it unfolds and have some really interesting conversations with people from all across the world. Of course, not every person we engage with is positive, but I think that about 85% of the general public are, which is a much larger number than we had ever thought. It's heartening to hear words of encouragement and support, to get thumbs up and even the odd hug, especially when we have felt like the whole world is against us. Our group has now grown, and we're now not just an anxious group of Jews from North Leeds, but a group that includes all sorts of people: Christians, Hindus, Muslims, students, retirees, and everybody in between. Even within this crowd today, we have many more allies than we first imagined we would when we started. Take a look around and see how many faces you don't recognise. These are our fantastic allies, and we are so lucky to have them supporting us. I know from my own experiences how cathartic these weekly sessions are, and how by 2 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon I always feel much better. The weeks when I've not been able to attend have always felt much longer, and I'm always raring to go at the following session. We're hoping to restart our Sundays in the coming weeks, and we would love to have some new faces to add to our Leeds family. Now, I could stand here and talk about this all day, but I thought it would be better to hear from the volunteers themselves. So I would like to introduce to you Tess, Harun, Louisa and David to tell you a little bit about their experiences.
I wanted to do something to answer the call of the families of those innocent people kidnapped and held by the terrorist organisation Hamas. And today I'm thinking of one hostage who is a British citizen, Emily Damari. The families asked us to act, to keep the hostages in the headlines, join rallies, spread the truth, and the weekly Tuesday vigils give us the opportunity to do all that. What is it like on those weekly vigils? Often it is not easy. I have been asked how much I get paid to be there, told what I'm doing is disgusting, and that I kill Palestinian babies. And I hear words of support and encouragement from the good people of Leeds. I have been told that more people than we might think do support Israel, urged to keep going, told that people are praying for the hostages, that they see what the Jewish community is facing and support us. And sometimes there are real conversations that cut through the propaganda and hatred. Conversations make a connection through which I've been able to encourage another perspective, challenge misinformation, and talk about how releasing the hostages is a humanitarian issue. The vigils are a small but positive action to take, and you can do it too. Please join us.
Hi. Volunteering with the Leeds Against Anti-Semitism team is really important to me because standing against hate is everyone's responsibility. The tragic events of October the 7th remind us of the devastating impact of anti-Semitism and hatred. It's a threat not only to the Jewish community but to the values of equality and respect that we all share. By coming together, we show that love and unity will always triumph over hate and division. Thank you.
So I just want to say, before I talk about my own experience on Tuesdays, that this catastrophe has shown me how much resilience the Leeds Jewish community has and how you look after each other, and I'm really proud to be a friend. October the 7th, that was a turning point for me. I watched as it unfolded that morning, more or less live, mostly on X. Since that day, many things that I was able to let slide in the past are now unconscionable. The many otherwise intelligent people that I admired, even loved, were eager to display what they see as their important pro-Palestinian activism at that catastrophic moment. They seemed to me like the worst kind of idiot. I got into a couple of arguments online and in real life. I don't think it made much difference to them, but it made a big difference to me. My friends and colleagues, it seemed, were without any capacity for insight, reason, reflection, or intelligence, and I have never felt so lost and so let down and so angry at my tribe. I've always been a part of the arty, left-wing community. That's because I've always worked in the arts. My whole life I've worked in the arts, and I have a strong social conscience, so I've leaned to the left. I fitted more or less. But for a long time, I've thought that the left's obsession with Palestine was foolish, misguided, misinformed, and I couldn't understand how they were happy to let it take priority over all else. But I was happy at the time to disagree. That has completely changed during this conflict. Now I'm happy to tell anyone who will listen that the Western left, my people, are not only wrong but dangerous. I'm not Jewish, but thank you. I'm not Jewish, but that doesn't mean I don't have any skin in this game. The whole world will be a safer place for all of us if more people will stand up against the many jihadi movements that are currently ruining the world for so many innocent people. I think most people who know anything at all can see Hamas for what it is, a murderous death cult that has to be fought. The same with Hezbollah and the Iranian regime. They are fascistic, they are genocidal, and the Western left have it backwards. So much projection. At the Tuesday lunchtime events in Leeds city centre, I have found that people can listen and do listen. This has restored my faith somewhat. The passers-by who engage with us tend to be the kind of people who are happy to admit that they don't know much about the situation in Israel or the Middle East and the Levant area. Those people who can't listen and won't engage are lost, and they may never find their way back. I try to talk to the others. Those people that are lost, they seem to think that they are righteous, good people, and they really, really aren't. Most of my friends are now ex-friends, even a couple of Jewish ones. I don't mind. I'm not glad to be rid of them because it's lonely without them. But I'm glad that I don't have to talk to them about this anymore. And I'm glad of the new friends that I've made. Finally, I'm glad to be using my gift of the gab and my facility for words and my capacity for understanding other people to do something concrete every Tuesday, or most of them, that I'm sure makes a difference. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Sometime in the early 70s, my late father sat me down and told me that he had something very, very important to talk to me about. He wanted to tell me about 2 occasions in his life that made a huge difference and that I needed to know about them. He firstly told me about the time when he was 12 years old. He was born in the East End of London, and at just 12 years old, he scaled a lamppost in Cable Street, where he lived, and he was protesting against Mosley and his fascist black shirts. He threw bricks at them, and him and his fellow protesters were able to stop the march in its tracks, away from the predominantly Jewish area. Secondly, he recalled at the age of 22, fighting his way through France and finally into Germany with his unit, where they were one of the first to reach the concentration camp at Bergen-Belsen. After describing the horrors that he saw, he went on to say he hoped that I would never have to stand up and be counted as he had to, but he knew that God forbid if I had to, I most certainly would. So, following the unforgettable atrocities of October the 7th, and then in the ensuing British and worldwide anti-Semitic reaction to that, including within my city of Leeds, I had no hesitation in joining Leeds Against Anti-Semitism. My wife Susan and I stand at the top of Lands Lane every Tuesday, come rain or shine, usually rain, handing out leaflets, having conversation, holding banners and placards, whichever anybody's happy to do, whilst being supported by the wonderful West Yorkshire Police. These actions that we take are very good, not just for the community, but for our own personal mental health and feeling of well-being, because in a virtually impossible situation, we are doing something positive to fight the anti-Semitic narrative. We know that we make a difference by the many positive and important conversations that we have, and by the reactions that we receive. Yes, we do get negatives quite regularly, but it's often an opportunity to put forward the truth in response to those negatives. Believe me, it is a lot more satisfying than screaming at the news on the TV. We have become a real band of brothers and sisters, and I ask all of you that have the time and the ability to be able to join us, please consider coming to join us. Am Israel Chai.
Thank you, everybody. So you see that we have a selection of our volunteers that have come up here, so I'd like to give them a round of applause, thanking them very much. We have Bolly the dog. Finally, I'd like to introduce Marshall, who's going to finish off the proceedings.
Distinguished guests, and to all of the supporters of Leeds Against Anti-Semitism here today. I have the great honour of thanking everyone for attending this event. However, before I do, I would like to say a few words. Our hearts reach out to each and every victim of the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and of course to those still held in captivity. However, it was not just Jews that were taken. The Hamas terrorists butchered anyone they could, irrespective of age, religion or nationality. From babies through to Holocaust survivors, men and women. And those they didn't murder, as we have heard from Adam, they took to Gaza. And those people have been in a living hell for a year now. What must they be going through? What must their families be going through? We will not rest until each and every hostage is brought back home. October the 7th impacted on each and every one of us in different ways. Disbelief, horror, fear and anger, to name but a few descriptions. Since October the 7th, those feelings have been amplified with the abhorrent rise in anti-Semitism on our streets, be it with the hateful marches here in our beloved city of Leeds, or the vile rhetoric we see every day on social media. But we as a community are resilient, and together with our amazing and dedicated committee, Leeds Against Anti-Semitism has become the voice of our community on the streets of Leeds. Thank you to each and every volunteer that has stood with us on our Tuesday vigils, who has marched through Leeds with us, and who is here today. We are a community that every single one of us should be proud of. Thank you. I'd now like to thank everybody for attending. Firstly, I'd like to thank Fabian Hamilton and Mark Seawoods that was here. I think he's still here. All of the councillors, the clergy, our amazing speakers obviously, and to thank you as well. Your presence has been pivotal in making us today a success. So on behalf of everybody at LLAA, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We must also take a moment to thank so many of our unsung heroes. Debbie, Jane and I would not be able to do what we do without half of what we do, without the outstanding support and dedication of our committee. Could we please have a round of applause for Hannah, Ruth, Ben, Alyssa, Zoe, Simon, Tess and Dilany. Your dedication and commitment is simply amazing. Thank you. We'd also like to thank Steve Bootle and Balloonatics for their help today as well. We also need to thank those that have supported us financially. This would not have been possible without your amazing support. You know who you are, and we respect your wishes to stay anonymous. In the words of Mark Twain, kindness is a language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see. Thank you. We must, as always, thank West Yorkshire Police for their amazing support. And of course, CST for helping make us feel so safe today. CST are an integral part of the community, and now more than ever, we appreciate their amazing work. Ladies and gentlemen, before we close today's proceedings, we would like to invite you to stay behind, as was mentioned earlier, to visit the installations, take photographs, and remember the hoodies and there's some jewellery for sale as well at the bottom end of the square. If anybody can stay behind at the end to help us clear up, it would be amazing. We would really appreciate it. I would now like to invite, once again, the amazing Tammy Sobel to sing Hatikva and, of course, the national anthem. Please join in and sing loud and sing proud.
I'm going to sing the Hatikva and then I'm going to read the English translation because I think it's very important to understand what it's all about.
Toward the eastern edges onward, and eye gazes towards Zion. Our hope is not yet lost. The hope that is 2,000 years old, to be a free nation in our land, the land of Zion, Jerusalem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody. Safe journey home. Thank you for supporting us.